Hi, I'm Merwin, a violinist with the Toledo Symphony. Ludwig van Beethoven was born in Bonn, Germany in 1770. 250 years later, when we think back on the year 2020, it's safe to say that we probably won't think of it as a Beethoven anniversary year. Instead, it's a year where our private lives collided with public crises. Though there have been many times in history where our society has wrestled with divided politics, a period of racial reckoning, a global pandemic, the age of social media has really put our personal responses to the outside world into the public domain. Artists and arts organizations are compelled to respond to the moment. It's amazing that centuries later, Beethoven remains one of the go-to composers in times of crisis. In 2009, during the throes of economic recession, the Harvard Business Journal published an article entitled, "In a Crisis, What Would Beethoven Do?" And right on cue, just last week, the Wall Street Journal chimed in with an article that asked, "What Beethoven can still teach us?" There are composers whose music feels divorced from their current realities, and often their music helps to provide escape to listeners from their circumstances. Beethoven isn't quite like that. Though he took pains to distance his music publicly from incidents in his personal or professional life, his music seethes with the vitality of one who deeply feels pain and suffering and pours it into his music. But time after time, in piece after piece, Beethoven transcends pain, overcomes obstacles, and finds joy. In the process, we as listeners and performers don't just find escape, we find catharsis. We leave concerts of Beethoven feeling moved, energized, and cleansed. In a nutshell, that's what this program is all about. We navigate between Beethoven at his most private and introverted, and Beethoven at his most public-facing. The three pieces on this program all come from a 3-year period in Beethoven's life, where the dramas of his personal life, this was the period of his immortal beloved letters, they all played out against the backdrop of the Napoleonic Wars that surrounded Vienna and forced Beethoven to retreat to other cities. We begin with 2 quartets, one written for 4 trombones, one for 4 stringed instruments. One was meant to be played outdoors on the towers of cathedrals and was ultimately played at Beethoven's own funeral for a crowd of 30,000 people. One was Beethoven's most private string quartet, dedicated not to a patron or a nobleman, but to a close friend, where Beethoven really experimented with the expressive power of his music and then ultimately withdrew the work from any public performance. We'll hear first the 3 equals for 4 trombones played in the Peristyle's rear promenade. You'll get this sense of being surrounded by the music as you sit in a public space, which is exactly what would have been the tradition of these equals or equali in Linz, the city where Beethoven wrote these pieces. Often, the equali would mark the beginning of a funeral for a person of the first importance, and were heard at the outside of the church to herald the arrival of the church authorities. And of course, in 1827, these pieces were chosen to mark Beethoven's own funeral. The second quartet is a string quartet, here presented in a version for string orchestra by the celebrated composer and conductor Gustav Mahler. Now, Mahler is known for his exuberance, his epic scope, and his vast instrumentations, but this piece, and Mahler's own arrangement of the piece, is lean and it's spare, and it has all the power of a clenched fist. One of Beethoven's most unrelenting, uncompromising, and powerful compositions, it has a surprisingly cheerful ending that has actually been compared to a well-timed bottle of champagne. Whereas the Seriosa was one of Beethoven's most private compositions, the Seventh Symphony was one of his most publicly acclaimed. The end of the Napoleonic Wars was in sight, and the symphony was premiered as part of a large-scale gala concert to honor wounded veterans. The symphony's second movement, an allegretto, was interpreted by listeners at the time to be honoring the sacrifices of the soldiers. However, Beethoven, as well as his audience, could sense the tide of the war beginning to turn, and so you get, in the finale of this piece, this incredibly joyful movement, one of the most exuberant movements in all of classical music. Of the many, many great quotes about Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, my favorite is the comedian Oscar Levant trying to talk his way out of a speeding ticket. You can't possibly hear the last movement of Beethoven's Seventh and drive slow. We hope that wherever you're experiencing this concert, whether you're at the Peristyle or in the comfort of your own home, that you also enjoy the restorative power of this great music. We can't wait to perform it for you.